Hello, hello, it's Elizabeth Busby here, and welcome to Discerning Marriage. Today we are talking about commitment, and specifically when your fear of commitment is a red flag versus when a fear of commitment is normal. I am very active on Instagram at Discerning Marriage. If you're interested in actually connecting with me personally, that's where I'm at. And I get a lot of DMs about people who have specific questions about things, and I can typically direct them to something else I've created that answers their question. But this one I had not created anything on, and a gentleman reached out and asked me if I had anything on commitment, and I didn't yet. So I told him I'm in the studio tomorrow and I will record a video for you, sir. Here we are. So how do you know when your fear of commitment is a red flag and when your fear of commitment is just normal and healthy? And I'm going to divide this into two areas. One is when you're getting into a relationship, and one is when you're engaged and about to get married. So if you're already in a relationship, you're engaged or almost engaged, you're thinking about getting married and you have some fears there, go ahead and skip forward to the dot that tells the dot, I don't know what it's called, on the timeline that tells you chapter. Okay. Yeah. That was my producer. Click to the right chapter and go to look at that piece about engagement. But for the rest of you, I'm going to talk about generally what that looks like just in a dating relationship. So we live in a culture that is extremely emasculating and that does not value commitment, really. There is a lot of fear around being committed. There's a lot of fear around the process of what that looks like. And there's a lot of not upholding the beauty and dignity of the two individual genders, the masculine and the feminine, and the different way that these two work together for human thriving. So when you have taken a lot of that structure, if you will, and you've taken a lot of the kind of understanding of what comes next at the end of in a person's life, like I'm an adult now, I'm thinking about getting married, what do I do to get there? When you take a lot of that structure out, people are really confused and there is a lot of room for chaos. And that's where we are. We are in a chaotic time when it comes to discerning marriage and dating and et cetera. The thing that I want to say about the implication of this is that you're going to have to take a step back from the culture's understanding at large. The way that the culture does dating and the way that the culture does romantic relationships and those sorts of things, it's just not great for human thriving. This whole you're expendable and I can sleep with one person this night and one person the next night and one person the next night and it doesn't matter. And it's all about my own pleasure. It's all about what I can get from you. It's all about having fun. It's all about seeking good feelings. All of that is garbage, you guys. It's not going to set you up for thriving. So when you're thinking about getting in a commitment, if you're looking at kind of the environment that's out there right now, and you're overwhelmed and intimidated by it, that is a good thing because you're recognizing that what's going on out there isn't great. Maybe you don't have the language for it. Maybe you used to live that life and you got chewed up and spit out and are dealing with a lot of the pain and woundedness from that life, and you're looking towards the future and you're like, I don't want to do that again. I didn't like it. It wasn't great. And there's this fear of committing. If that's where this is coming from, looking at the culture and trying to fit into it, and you're like, I just can't do it. That's actually a good thing, right? It's not a red flag, in my opinion, to be concerned about all of this because none of that is good for human thriving. So if that's you, if you're sitting here and you're looking at this and you're like, when I get on dating apps, people just want to hook up, or I'm really looking for marriage, but I can't find anyone who isn't looking for marriage. And so, I want to get married and I can't find anyone else who also wants to get married. And my options are really small. And I'm afraid of getting into that world because I don't know what's going to happen next. That to me is actually indicative of a conscience that recognizes your dignity and the dignity of marriage. What I would recommend in that situation is that you just take a step back and give yourself the permission to do things differently than the world is doing them. Because authentic dating, recording, or whatever language you guys want to put on discerning marriage and being intentional in that discernment of marriage, it is not going to look anything like what the culture is looking like right now. And that, I think, is key to recognizing, right? If you're uncomfortable because you don't feel like you fit in with what's going on socially right now, I think that's a good thing. And you can take a step back, reevaluate, and then look for someone who does share your value system and behave in a way that is consistent with your value system. So men, you can begin asking women on dates if you find women who are a good fit. Sometimes that's going to be online. Some dating apps have a really awesome opportunity or way to connect with people who share your values, or you just connect with people when you get to your kind of real life dates. You begin having conversations quickly in the first date about your value system. I'm not going to sleep with you. today. And, I'm waiting until marriage, et cetera. Whatever that looks like for you in that conversation, you would have that conversation quickly and early and weed out the people who don't share those value systems. If you're a woman, that can look like being, this is kind of a conversation for another time, but I have no problem with a woman making her intentions known to a man who may be interested, or she may be interested in, or who she thinks is interested in him, and letting him know that she's open, or even asking him out if that's something she wants to do on the first date, and then letting him take over from there. But making sure that you are being intentional about the way you're going about this different approach, which is, I'm going to intentionally want to go on dates with you to see if I want to get in a commitment with you. And if I'm in a commitment with you, I'm doing that because I want to see if I want to marry you. Kind of that rhythm and routine, that's super different from the hookup culture. Now, when the commitment issues become a red flag are if you deep down in your heart, even if you're going through the motions of dating, even if you're asking people out on dates or being asked on dates, and even if you're boyfriend, girlfriend, those sorts of things, if deep in your heart, you are afraid of getting married, are afraid of making that commitment, that is when I would say that fear is a red flag. Because if you are not free to say yes to getting married, then you ought not to be dating at all. You need to take a step back from that world and really work on healing yourself. And because I am a marriage and family therapist, I am a big believer in going to therapy. Obviously, I'm a big believer in going to therapy. That's my profession. But I'm in the field because I think it's good for human thriving. So I would strongly recommend that if that's where you're at, you get a counselor to walk with you through all of that stuff. A bride or a groom is not going to fix that for you. Vows are not going to fix that for you. Because it's going to be rooted not in what's going on in the present moment, but in your past, right? It could be rooted in your parents' marriage. It could be rooted in your own attachment, your relationship with your parents early on. If they had a marriage that was not worthy of imitation, or if they got divorced and your whole family and your life crumbled around you, all of that stuff and a bajillion other things could have affected the way that you're feeling about your fear. But that's where I would say that fear of commitment is a red flag. So you may be willing to go through the motions of like going on dates and getting, boyfriend, girlfriend and all that stuff. But when you're alone with your thoughts and you're actually willing to be courageous and honest, if you're feeling afraid of making that commitment, that is when I would say it is a red flag. Now, this is a little bit different than chapter 2, which is when you're engaged. So hi, all of you who just skipped ahead. But when you're engaged, here is how you know if the fear of commitment means you ought to break up or push pause on the relationship. The distinction I want to make here is, are you having concerns about the person, or are you having concerns about the marriage vows stuff in general? If you are concerned about things within the person, like if this individual, your fiance, has a personality quality that makes you nervous, or a habit or a vice that makes you really nervous, or a propensity to not listen to you or not validate you or not take you seriously, like those sorts of things. If they have a ton of debt and they're not willing to change it or make steps in a healthy financial direction. If they have a pornography addiction, they're not really willing to work on that and make those changes. There are more things than I could say in this video that would be legitimate red flags. But if you have one of those about the person, that's where I would say you need to immediately push pause. You need to stop whatever you're doing in your progression toward the altar and really focus on that, because vows are not going to change those things. Some of those things can be changed, right? When the person wants to change and is going to choose to change, but they have to make that decision. You can't make it for them. And just getting married is not going to fix it. And I know so many people who found themselves in a situation where they were like, let's just get married anyway. It'll be fine. Marriage will make it better. Or when we can finally have a sexually intimate relationship, that'll make it better. Or when we have these kids and we have this external focus we can work on together, that'll make it better. That does not make it better. It makes it way worse, way worse. So I think having the awareness that these things within the person aren't going to just change when we get married. We need to work on this now before we get married. It takes a lot of courage. We don't live in a culture that fosters courage, but I know you can do it. I know you have courage. So that's what I would say would be an immediate pause. Now, if you're engaged or almost engaged and you are having cold feet concerns about getting married, and it's more about marriage in general, that is not always a hard stop, end it for me. And the reason is because sometimes that comes from woundedness, like I talked about in the last chapter that you might not have seen, but what I talked about in the last chapter of if you have fear about marriage from your own woundedness, right? The fear of making a commitment and the ability to honor that commitment, or the other person's ability to honor that commitment, could have come from like your parents' divorce or your parents' not stable marriage, or a myriad of things, a lot of reasons that you could have that concern. Some of that would mean you need to push pause and you need to take some time to heal those. But the fear of getting married could also just be a healthy reverence for what's actually happening here, which is I'm going to make a vow to you, an irrevocable vow, meaning I can't break it. I can't take it back. There's no changing it. They're going to make an irrevocable vow to me, can't take it back, can't change it. And no matter what life throws us, we're going to stick together and honor that. Like, there is a healthy reverence and respect for what a big deal that is. And just recognizing that and having a reverence for that, it's a good thing, but it can also manifest in a lot of nerves and a lot of concerns and a lot of like cold feet. But that to me is not a reason to call off the wedding universally across the board, right? For some people, maybe. But for most people, I think when you get to a point where you're like, holy smokes, there's no takesy backsies after I make this plan, like, pray for the grace to honor the vows that you recognize you're about to make, and pray for the grace to live them well, and pray for that healthy respect, continuing to foster that healthy respect of like, this is really worth a lot of effort and energy, and I need to treat it as such. It's precious and vulnerable, and I need to treat it as such, and it needs to command a huge area of my heart and my energy and my time to foster it and to cultivate it and to make it beautiful. Like those pieces, that kind of cold feet thought is not necessarily something that would end a relationship. It's just something that you can pray through and that you can talk to your significant other about, and trusted people in your life, like your mentor couple or your pastor or someone like that. But it stems more from a reverence for the sacrament. And I think it's the sort of thing that you can absolutely work through and is not necessarily a reason to call off a wedding. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any follow-up questions, you can send them in the comment section, or you can message me at Discerning Marriage on Instagram, and I will reply personally to your message. And I love talking about this. I think it's really important. I'm so glad, thank you, Instagram follower, for this question. I hope it was helpful. Until next time, stay close to the heart of Jesus and be not afraid. Bye.